We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
The ambassador of Spain to the Philippines, His Excellency Jorge Moraga Sanchez, visited the newly opened Iglesia Ni Cristo Museum for a courtesy call on INC Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo Manalo.
China slams NBA Commissioner Adam Silver's defense of free speech, canceling a basketball fan event and launching him in the state-run press as Apple is warned it could be the next Western firm punished for supporting democracy protesters in Hong Kong.
And a defiant White House declares war against the impeachment investigation of President Trump, blasting the process as partisan, illegitimate, and unconstitutional, and saying neither the president nor his administration will cooperate.
And the Church of Christ in Northern California holds emergency preparedness and active shooting awareness training.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. The ambassador of Spain to the Philippines, His Excellency Jorge Moraga Sanchez, visited the newly opened Iglesia Ni Cristo Museum for a courtesy call on INC Executive Minister Brother Eduardo V. Manalo on Wednesday morning. Now, Ambassador Jorge Sanchez is the first ambassador from Spain and the first diplomat from Western Europe to visit the INC Executive Minister. He arrived together with Spain's Consul General in the Philippines, Fernando Heredia Noguer. Now, Brother Joel San Pedro, head of the INC's Overseas Mission Office, said, and I quote, "Since his arrival in the Philippines late last year, Ambassador Moragas has taken notice of the Iglesia Ni Cristo. He recognizes the INC as a strong institution which does a lot of good things all around the Philippines as well as in the communities all around the world where the church is found." The Ambassador San Pedro added, has not only heard of the INC's activities but also knows members of the church, confirming the reputation of its members as honest, responsible, and hardworking. During the meeting, Ambassador Moragas also expressed curiosity and interest about the church's beliefs, practices, and history as well. Brother San Pedro said that the Spanish ambassador's meeting with Brother Eduardo went very well. Afterwards, the ambassador was pleasantly surprised by the great number of brethren who waved small flags of Spain and the INC and cheerfully greeted him as he departed. He also expressed admiration for the beauty of the INC Museum. This is the first time that a foreign diplomat making a courtesy call to the INC Executive Minister was received at the INC Museum. Ambassador Moragas has a strong affinity with the Philippines as his mother was born in Baguio City. His grandfather was among those who came to the Philippines along with the Tobacco Company of the Philippines. The ambassador first visited the country when he was just 13 years old. Ambassador Moragas' hometown is in Barcelona, where the church has a 1,260-seater house of worship, one of the largest INC houses of worship outside the Philippines. Meanwhile, the INC Executive Minister himself officiated the worship service that dedicated to God the house of worship in Barcelona in 2012. In 2017, Brother Eduardo also led a worldwide evangelical mission from Barcelona, Spain, where he officiated a worship service that was broadcast all over the world through WebEx technology. The first pastoral visitation of the executive minister to Spain was when he led a worship service in Madrid in 2010.
Houston Rockets coach Mike D'Antoni and Rocket star James Harden respond to the NBA's diplomatic row with China, triggered by a tweet from the team's general manager Daryl Morey backing the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. The NBA had been hoping to boost its popularity in the lucrative China market this week with a pair of preseason exhibition games, but those plans are now thrown into disarray.
We all have freedom of speech. That's the world we live in. You know, everybody should, how they feel and their thought process, be able to speak it. You know, obviously some people are going to feel some type of way, some people are going to agree. That's just the world we live in. I'm here for Adam Silver.
No, that's not my job. I worry about X's and O's, and they have people that deal with that.
Meanwhile, CNBC reported that China's largest online shopping sites, owned by giants Alibaba and JD.com, appear to have removed items related to the Houston Rockets after the NBA team's general manager tweeted support for the Hong Kong anti-government protesters, which drew strong criticism in the world's second largest economy. Searches in Chinese for Houston Rockets and rockets on Alibaba-owned Taobao and Tmall and its rival JD.com yielded no results, highlighting the potential financial fallout the Rockets could face.
Meanwhile, China on Wednesday slammed NBA Commissioner Adam Silver's defense of free speech, canceling a basketball fan event and lashing him in the state-run press. As Apple, meanwhile, was warned it could be the next Western firm punished for supporting democracy protesters in Hong Kong. The U.S. League has drawn fire from Chinese broadcasters, sponsors, and social media after Daryl Morey tweeted a message Friday saying, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong," after the NBA called Morey's tweet inappropriate. In a statement on Chinese social media platform Weibo, League Commissioner Adam Silver insisted at a press conference in Tokyo that the league would not apologize and would support freedom of expression. Take a listen.
Essentially, what I've said in that statement is the long-held values of the NBA are to support freedom of expression, and certainly freedom of expression by members of the NBA community. And in this case, Daryl Morey, as the general manager of the Houston Rockets, enjoys that right as one of our employees. We are not apologizing for Daryl exercising his freedom of expression. I regret, again, having communicated directly with many friends in China, that so many people are upset, including millions and millions of our fans.
中国就驻休斯敦总领馆已经就休斯敦火箭俱乐部有关人士的错误言论向对方提出了严正交涉。中国篮球协会以及休斯敦火箭队的中方合作伙伴也都相继发表了声明。我想中方的立场已经非常清楚了。另外，我建议你去关注一下普通中国民众对此事的反应和他们的态度，跟中方开展交流与合作，却不了解中国的民意，这是行不通的。
Meanwhile, in an editorial, the state-run China Daily accused the NBA of a U-turn and said Silver's remarks showed the league's earlier honey-mouthed statements had been, quote, nothing but an attempt to prevent the hemorrhaging of profits made in China. The Chinese Basketball Association, which Yao Ming now heads, has also cut off ties with the Rockets. Meanwhile, the Global Times, a nationalist paper known for communicating the ruling Communist Party's attitudes to the world, issued a blunt warning to global firms that speaking out on human rights and other sensitive issues would cost them market access. It said the problem is that Morey's freedom is at the expense of the Rockets' huge commercial interests, which the team is unwilling to give up. It's a paradox with which Americans are grappling, the editorial said. It added the biggest lesson which can be drawn from the matter is that entities that value commercial interests must make their members speak cautiously. China state media accused Apple, meanwhile, on Wednesday of supporting pro-democracy protesters, warning that the U.S. tech giant would suffer consequences for its unwise and reckless decision in an echo of campaigns against other Western firms. An opinion piece in the People's Daily, the mouthpiece of the ruling Communist Party, highlighted a transport app available on Apple Store that it alleged helped protesters identify police in Hong Kong. Apple's approval for the app obviously helps rioters, the article said. Does this mean Apple intended to be an accomplice to the rioters? The article then cautioned that, quote, the Map app is just the tip of the iceberg. It alleged that a song advocating Hong Kong's independence had appeared on the Apple Music store in the southern Chinese city, then issued an ominous warning. Apple has to think about the consequences of its unwise and reckless decision, the article said. Apple, which has a huge presence in China, did not immediately reply to an emailed request for comment.
Houston fans react to the storm engulfing General Manager Daryl Morey after he tweeted his support for protesters in Hong Kong. Here's more.
I feel like we never get the attention, and now we're getting the attention, but in a negative way. So, but I think at this time it's just so crazy that any tweet you put out there, people just tear to pieces for an opinion. I think everyone should have their own opinion, and that's part of being an American, right?
Everything's bigger and better in Texas. We're a strong state, and people say we should be our own nation. And I think the Houston Rockets will show that for a reason, because we're going to use this for our good, and we'll show China and whoever else wants to boycott us that you're the one that's losing, and it'll backfire in their face, in my personal opinion.
Well, for me, I just want to focus on basketball. I don't care about all these politics as long as the Rockets win. And, we're having a new addition, Russell Westbrook, and hopefully this does not affect how they play.
I think, in my personal opinion, we have that right here in America, that he's allowed to say what he wants to say. I mean, his free speech is protecting the Constitution. Now, I know there's money behind this, but, a lot of people have died over the years in past history for their freedom in this country.
The United States said it would curb visas for Chinese officials until Beijing ends its repression of Uyghurs and other Muslims in the western region of Xinjiang, a day after imposing commercial restrictions. The one-two punch by President Trump's administration marks the most forceful attempt by a foreign power to address what some rights groups call a historic crisis in Xinjiang, and comes amid a range of feuds between the U.S. and China. China has forcibly detained over 1 million Muslims in a brutal systemic campaign to erase religion and culture in Xinjiang, Secretary of Mike Pompeo wrote on Twitter. In an accompanying statement, Mr. Pompeo said that the State Department would restrict visas granted to government and ruling Communist Party officials involved in detention or abuse of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, or members of other predominantly Muslim ethnic group in Xinjiang. The order will also affect other family members, including children who may be seeking to study in the United States. The State Department also said it could not specify which officials were affected due to U.S. confidentiality laws, but lawmakers have specifically asked for action against Chen Quanguo, the Communist Party chief for Xinjiang. Reputed within the party for his handling of minority groups, he earlier led iron-fisted policies aimed at crushing dissent in Tibet.
Beijing decried a U.S. decision to restrict visas for Chinese officials linked to the repression of Xinjiang Muslims and called on Washington to withdraw the measure. The U.S. is disregarding the facts, slandering and smearing China on Xinjiang-related issues, Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang said at a regular press conference where he said the U.S. actions were guided by sinister intentions. Meanwhile, China is planning tighter visa restrictions for U.S. nationals with ties to anti-China groups. Following similar U.S. restrictions on Chinese nationals, Reuters reports citing people with knowledge of the proposed curbs. China's Ministry of Public Security has for months been working on rules to limit the ability of anyone employed or sponsored by U.S. intelligence services and human rights groups to travel to China, a news agency said. The proposed changes follow the introduction by the United States of tighter rules for visas for Chinese scholars in May. Another source said the tighter restrictions come amid heightened concern in Beijing that the U.S. and other governments are using such organizations to incite anti-government protests in both mainland China and Hong Kong, and would also be in retaliation for the U.S. visa restrictions against Chinese researchers and officials.
A super typhoon, among the most powerful in decades, was set to hit Japan this holiday weekend, according to weather officials on Wednesday, and could severely disrupt both the Rugby World Cup and Formula One Grand Prix. Typhoon Hagibis, currently classed as violent, the top end of Japan's storm scale, is on track to directly hit part of Japan's east coast, possibly barreling straight into Tokyo on Saturday, although it may weaken significantly by then. It could wreak havoc on the Rugby World Cup being hosted in Japan, potentially washing out several key games. Practice for the Japan Grand Prix also starts Friday in the western city of Suzuka. An official from Japan's Meteorological Agency, or JMA, said the storm is currently as strong as 4 of the biggest typhoons to hit Japan in recent decades, including Faxai, which struck the Tokyo region last month, causing widespread damage in the Chiba area. Hagibis will have a power that matches these 4 typhoons, and we expect maximum wind speeds of 45 meters per second or 100 miles per hour on Saturday, according to the official at a briefing. In a statement, meanwhile, the JMA warned that it's possible that violent winds, torrential rains, high waves, and violent waves will be seen across the nation. On Wednesday evening, the typhoon was churning above waters in western Pacific, packing gusts of up to 270 kilometers or 170 miles per hour, according to the weather agency. And the current track has the storm veering towards Japan's central coast, but its final path remains uncertain.
The Kurdish administration in northeastern Syria called up civilians on Wednesday to defend the region against a feared Turkish assault believed to be imminent. We announced 3 days of general mobilization in northern and eastern Syria, it said in a statement, urging all civilians to head to the border with Turkey to resist during the delicate historical moment. It also called on Kurds in Syria and abroad to protest against Ankara's planned offensive. Ankara said on Tuesday it would shortly begin an offensive into northern Syria as it sent more armored vehicles to the border. Turkey's communications director Fahrettin Altun wrote in the Washington Post that Kurdish forces can either defect or Turkey will have no choice but to stop them from disrupting our counter-Islamic State efforts. U.S. President Donald Trump has blown hot and cold since a surprise announcement on Sunday that Washington was pulling back 50 to 100 special operators from Syria's border with Turkey. After appearing to give a green light to the Turkish invasion, he later threatened to obliterate Turkey's economy if it went too far. He also insisted the United States had not abandoned its Kurdish allies by pulling forces out of the area. He said, "We may be in the process of leaving Syria, but in no way have we abandoned the Kurds, who are special people and wonderful fighters," Trump tweeted. He stressed that Washington has an important relationship with NATO member and trading partner Turkey. He also said that any unforced or unnecessary fighting by Turkey would prompt devastating consequences for the country's economy. A defiant White House declared war Tuesday against the impeachment investigation of Donald Trump, blasting the process as partisan, illegitimate, and unconstitutional, and saying neither the president nor his administration will cooperate.
Well, we'd like to see.
In a fiery letter, the White House threw down the gauntlet to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the chairman of 3 congressional panels leading the inquiry, challenging them to proceed with their effort to oust Trump despite zero future cooperation. Put simply, you seek to overturn the results of the 2016 election and deprive the American people of the president they have freely chosen. White House counsel Pat Cipollone wrote in an 8-page letter, "Your inquiry lacks any legitimate constitutional foundation, any pretense of fairness, or even the most elementary due process protections," he said, of the probe, which is weighing whether Trump abused his office by seeking a corruption probe in Ukraine of his rival Joe Biden. President Trump cannot permit his administration to participate in this partisan inquiry under these circumstances. Pelosi fired back, terming the letter manifestly wrong and describing it as another unlawful attempt to hide the facts. "Mr. President," and I quote, "you are not above the law. You will be held accountable," she said, warning that continued efforts to hide the truth of the president's abuse of power from the American people will be regarded as further evidence of obstruction. House Democratic leaders on Tuesday subpoenaed top diplomat Gordon Sondland to testify at a deposition and hand over a slew of documents related to their impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. The Trump administration has ordered the top diplomat not to appear. Ambassador to the European Union Gordon Sondland had voluntarily agreed to be deposed by House Democrats who were expected to press him about Trump's effort this year to pressure Ukraine into investigating a political rival.
The failure to produce this witness, the failure to produce these documents, we consider yet additional strong evidence of obstruction of the constitutional functions of Congress, a co-equal branch of government. And by preventing us from hearing from this witness and obtaining these documents, the President and Secretary of State are taking actions that prevent us from getting the facts needed to protect the nation's security. We know Ambassador Sondland was a key player in efforts to obtain a commitment from Ukraine to investigate a bogus conspiracy theory about the 2016 election, as well as Joe Biden and his son. And we know that the ambassador has relevant evidence on whether the meeting with the president that the Ukrainians desperately sought with President Trump was being conditioned on these investigations that the president believed would help his re-election campaign. But we are also aware that the ambassador has text messages or emails on a personal device which have been provided to the State Department, although we have requested those from the ambassador, and the State Department is withholding those messages as well. Those messages are also deeply relevant to this investigation and the impeachment inquiry. We know from the text messages that Ambassador Sondland was in discussion with Ukrainian counterparts, with fellow diplomatic personnel, and the President, as well as at least one U.S. Senator, about the course of events that we are investigating. We know from those text messages that diplomatic personnel raised a concern with him that military assistance was being withheld to secure help from Ukraine in the president's re-election campaign. This is one of the few impeachment inquiries in the history of our country. It goes to the core of whether the president abused his office to seek political help in his re-election campaign, and did so to the detriment of our nation's security. Did so by effectively coercing a country that has been invaded by Russia to investigate a rival and condition the relationship between this country and that country on whether they were willing to play ball.
And we have breaking news coming in from Germany. At least 2 people were killed Wednesday in a shooting on a street in the German city of Halle, according to police, adding that the perpetrators were on the run. Take a look. Now, local police have arrested 1 person but told people to remain vigilant on Wednesday afternoon. Investigators previously said the perpetrators fled in a vehicle and a manhunt was underway. Now, according to initial information, 2 people have been killed in Halle. Several shots were fired, according to the spokesperson, a police spokesperson, and the alleged perpetrators are fleeing in a vehicle. We are asking the public to stay in their homes. Halle police later said they were investigating further information from the public, urged the people to stay calm. 1 victim's body was in the street outside the synagogue, while another victim was said to have been shot at a nearby kebab shop. A separate shooting was reported in the town of Landsberg, around a 20-minute drive from Halle. Now, sources told Bild, a newspaper in Germany, a taxi driver was injured after an attempted hijacking targeted his car. Police have not confirmed whether the incidents are linked. The Halle incident took place on Humboldtstrasse, which houses a synagogue and Jewish cemetery. Police didn't immediately confirm local reports that a man had attempted to break through the door of the synagogue and then shot at a passerby. Some reports said the victim was a woman using a nearby tram stop. The Bild newspaper reported that the attacker used a submachine gun in the assault and threw a hand grenade into the cemetery. A spokesperson for the local Jewish community, Der Spiegel, told Der Spiegel that up to 80 worshippers were inside the synagogue at the time, but security measures at the synagogue's entrance withstood the attack. Now, local reports said one of the victims was killed outside a kebab shop around 600 kilometers or 600 meters away, where witnesses told Focus the assailant was wearing a helmet, mounted with a camera, and wearing combat fatigues. The attack came during Yom Kippur, a Jewish religious festival that sees observers fast and pray at synagogues to atone for sins. Halle's main railway station was shut as the operation is continuing.
The Church of Christ in Northern California holds emergency preparedness and active shooting awareness training. Diana Rizgal reports from San Francisco.
As of 2018, the United States was ranked the #1 gun-owning country. According to the Gun Violence Archive for the United States in 2019, there has already been 309 verified gun shootings, with 10,860 deaths as of September 22.
The Church of Christ in Northern California held a 2-day seminar called Emergency Preparedness, with an emphasis on active shooting awareness.
Day 1 was held in Daly City, California, and Day 2 was held in San Jose, California.
A seminar that I just performed or gave was actually an active shooter preparedness awareness seminar. To be able to create awareness and help our congregation would be able to not only prevent these things, but to also allow us to retain our First Amendment rights, which is the right to worship. To be able to also not only create awareness, the confidence and courage they need to be able to defend their faith.
I learned about how to be aware with everything going on nowadays. You know, a lot of the churches are getting attacked. So I was really interested in attending, and I just want to know what to do.
This activity we have, the seminar today, is of help not only for the officers but also to the brethren and also those who are not members, that when our activities will come, we could help them and we could maintain peace and order. And also it will result for the glory of God, because we know that as members of the Church of Christ, especially we the ministers, and through the church administration, we want that all our activities in the Church of Christ is for the good of everyone.
Reporting from San Jose, California, I am Diana Riscal, always 1 with 25.
Thank you, Diana. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
Now in its 51st year, Eagle Broadcasting Corporation has held various child care and development programs. With the support of participating organizations and sponsors, EBC conducted the following activities. Sports clinic program wherein basketball coaches and players taught students the importance of discipline.
So if I say 3 claps, 2 claps, 1, 2, 3, 0.
Confidence,
Fire! Stance!
and teamwork. Free haircut, free massage, feeding programs, school supplies distribution, and storytelling spearheaded by Net 25 Kids.
Sa kanya, nagkasakit po. Nagkasakit.
EBC Cares, enabling a better community.
Welcome back. The IMF's new managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, warned of growing rifts in the global economy and urged coordinated action to heal trade divisions. She said that the world is facing a slowing of growth, largely due to trade tensions that will only worsen as indirect effects begin to impact economies. Take a look.
2 years ago, the global economy was in synchronized upswing. Measured by GDP, nearly 75% of the world was accelerating. Today, even more of the world economy is moving in sync. But, unfortunately, this time growth is decelerating. To be precise, in 2019, we expect slower growth in nearly 90% of the world. In other words, the world economy is now in synchronized slowdown. And this widespread deceleration means that growth this year will fall to its lowest rate since the beginning of the decade. So why the slowdown in 2019? There is a range of issues and one common theme across these issues: fractures. I will start with trade. We have spoken in the past about the dangers of trade disputes. Now we see that they are actually taking a toll. Global trade growth has come to almost standstill, in part because of trade tensions. Worldwide manufacturing activity and investment have weakened substantially. There is a serious risk that services and consumption could also soon be affected. And even if growth picks up in 2020, the current drifts could lead to changes that last for a generation. Broken supply chains, siloed trade sectors, a digital Berlin Wall that forces countries to choose between technological systems. And our goal has to be to fix these fractures. Our world is intertwined, so our responses must be coordinated.
The IMF is expected to unveil its forecast for global growth when it publishes the World Economic Outlook October 15th at the beginning of the annual meetings.
Penelope Kujiano-Goldberg, the World Bank's chief economist, says ongoing trade tensions across the world may prevent some poor countries from ever getting out of poverty.
If this continues and investment remains low, this means that some countries will never manage to get out of poverty, but it also means countries that have managed to lift themselves out of poverty, that have become middle-income countries by now, they may revert, they may go backwards. It's actually many advanced countries that have unilaterally returned to protectionism. So our message is, to a certain extent, directed towards those countries. We make a case for keeping markets open. At the same time, we make an appeal to developing countries, especially to large developing countries that have managed to grow, to embrace their new status. In the World Bank, we are particularly focused on Africa because this is where poverty is concentrated, in particular among fragile economies. Debt levels are very high, higher than ever before. That increases the risk of a financial crisis. I think trade is still very important, but Africa could turn to itself. So there could be still a lot. It's a very big continent with enormous potential, both human potential but also natural resources. There could be a lot of trade within Africa. But for this to happen, the African market needs to be integrated. And so right now, Africa is, the countries in Africa are completely disjoined from each other, but also within countries.
Over the many years, right?
The World Bank released a report Tuesday warning that if the trade conflict worsens, more than 30 million people could be pushed into poverty, measured as income levels below $5.50 a day. That equates to a drop in global income as much as $1.4 trillion, the report said. But trade continues to provide a lifeline to pull countries out of poverty. Kujiano-Goldberg said if policymakers take steps to plug into worldwide production linkages known as global value chains, these production links involve parts and components going back and forth across borders to finally produce finished goods for sale. The advantage for less developed countries is that they can step onto the production ladder with just one component without needing the advanced technology and skills to manufacture a finished product. More news will be coming your way when Eagle News International returns.
Huli na MTRCB ang mag-provide ng
Hello everyone! I'm here in Cairo, Egypt at the famous pyramids of Giza. Stay tuned to watch Digital Nest every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Reporting from EBC Egypt Bureau, I'm Zara Angeles Valdez and I am 1 with 25.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave some love by giving it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe here at EBC Digital Nest so you don't miss any of our upcoming features.
Accurate and fair reporting. Not only from Batanes to Tawi-Tawi, but also abroad. Detailed and timely stories relevant to people all over the world. Catch all of these at Net25, your reliable source of news, entertainment, and technology updates.
Mga kamag-anak, kaibigan at kababayan po namin sa Middle East and North Africa, masayang balita ang hatid po namin sa inyo. Ang Net25 ay makakasama nyo na sa inyong mga tahanan. Mapapanood nyo na ang inyong mga paboritong programa sa pamamagitan ng OSN, ang pinakamalaking entertainment network sa buong rehiyon. Sa Channel 725, maihahatid na namin sa inyo ang mga pangunahing balita at mahahalagang impormasyon. Kaya makisaya, makisalo tuwing umaga at panoorin ang mga programa ng mga hinahangaang celebrities and OPM artists, same day as the Philippines. You can also watch Net25 live and on demand anytime, anywhere on any mobile device on OSN Play. Kaya tawag na sa OSN to learn more on how to get Net25. Sa Net25 on OSN, siguradong at home ka dito.
The Church of Christ in Southern Ontario joins in the city's effort to plant trees in hopes to improve the neighborhood's quality of life. Angel Cacho reports.
The Church of Christ in Southern Ontario joins the city's effort to plant trees in the hopes of improving the neighborhood's quality of life.
We're here today planting trees, so thank you so much for coming and helping us make Mississauga a better place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We learned this in high school that trees gives oxygen, and oxygen is needed to live. So this kind of activity is really very important. And this is in line also with the present church administration's campaign to intensify all the works in the church, and that includes CFO activities. This is an activity of the CFO of Southern Ontario.
So yeah, first I'd just like to thank Church of Christ for coming out today to plant 400 trees in Lake Aquitaine Park. The importance of planting trees really is to better the environment and better the people that live there. So in the city of Mississauga, we have a lot of beautiful natural areas. We also have a lot of parking lots, roads, and concrete spaces, more urban spaces that definitely can contribute to a heating effect called urban heat island effect. So it's really important that we're adding trees to the local environment in Mississauga to help cool the atmosphere here locally, and also on a global scale to try to combat climate change. Just thank you for being here, for helping your community. I love to see groups come out and just dedicate their time towards helping the environment, helping the people in their community, and the Church of Christ is definitely doing that by being here today.
In conjunction with its volunteer services, helping improve the environment is one of the many events sponsored by the Church of Christ. Reporting from Lake Aquitaine in Mississauga, Ontario, for Eagle News, I'm Angel Cacho, 1 with 25.
And for our sports news, here's Ben Bernaldez.
NBA Commissioner Adam Silver is ready to accept the consequences for defending freedom of speech, even if supporting those values means losing the riches that Chinese business partnership have brought the league. 40 years after the Washington Bullets played exhibition games in Beijing and Shanghai as the first NBA club to visit China, the league and its lucrative relationship with the nations of 1.4 billion people faces its toughest test. It's only the latest battle over values championed by Silver, the 57-year-old American who replaced David Stern as the NBA's boss in February 2014. He has banned an owner for life for racist remarks and moved an NBA All-Star game over a law discriminating against the gay and transgender communities. A socially conscious league whose biggest star players have criticized U.S. President Donald Trump and Sean's ceremonial White House visit. LeBron James famously calling Trump a bum in 2017 tweet was thrust into controversy again Friday when Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey tweeted, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." Hong Kong has been rocked by protests since June that were ignited by a now-scrapped plan to allow extraditions of criminal suspects to the mainland, but snowballed into a movement calling for more democratic freedoms and police accountability. Morey's tweet shattered some China sponsorship for the Rockets. Retired Chinese star Yao Ming's former club, Chinese television dropped planned telecasts of NBA preseason games in China. Early NBA statements on the issue drew fire from U.S. critics as overly capitulating, setting the stage for Silver to settle matters in Tokyo. Meanwhile, in tennis, Andy Murray exited the Shanghai Masters in a fiery defeat, but three tournament in China offered enough evidence to suggest that his comeback from major surgery could have a fairy tale ending. Just over 2 weeks ago, the 32-year-old Briton told the media that it would be naive to think he will return to being the player that topped the world rankings in 2016. At that point, the start of his time in China, he had yet to win an ATP Tour singles match since undergoing career-saving hip surfacing surgery in January. At Shenzhou Championship 2 days late, he got that landmark first victory. He lost his next match to eventual champion Alex de Minaur and said afterwards that he is playing top 70 to top 60 tennis. Most observers felt that the three-time Grand Slam winner, who only returned to playing singles in mid-August, was being harsh on himself. Last week, he moved on to the China Open in Beijing, which boasted a stronger field and offered more proof that his comeback was moving along very nicely. In his opener, Murray claimed his biggest post-surgery scalp yet, defeating 13th-ranked U.S. Open semifinalist Matteo Berrettini. Murray has consistently said his hip is pain-free, but he does not have the fitness to play several matches a week and needs to be quicker across the court. Nevertheless, the next day, he beat fellow Briton Cameron Norrie in 3 sets. Victory brought another small landmark, putting Murray in the quarterfinals of a tournament for the first time in a year. He lost in the last 8 to top seed Dominic Thiem, who would go on to win the China Open, but said afterwards that the comeback was going better than expected. His ranking, which plunged to 503, jumped to 289. And these are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez and I'm 1 with 25.
Now, usually museums are associated with old things from the past. While visiting Tacoma, Washington, Eagle News correspondent Thomas I. Likeness found a museum of the young where you can see the future, or at least the people of the future. Thomas?
Children's museums. They're principally an American phenomenon. They've been around for about 120 years now, the first ones beginning in Boston and New York. There are several located in larger cities in the U.S. There are none in Canada, although there are a couple of science explorer spaces. How does a children's museum differ from the ones adults go to? Well, first, you're allowed to touch things, to play with things, and the atmosphere is informal. The whole idea is for kids to learn through play, according to Kate Stafford, the manager of the Children's Museum in Tacoma, Washington. Stafford says they believe it's a child's right to have the opportunity to play, adding, "This is how we learn." She says skills learned through play take a shorter time to master. Come to think of it, adults do the same thing. We just call them hobbies. Amiel Saul, his wife Jay, and their children dropped by the museum on this Saturday afternoon. He says they found out about it during his time in the Army.
Actually, while I was still in the military, we have this community that we share about places to go with our family. And this is one of the most place to visit with kids.
Because of the large number of military families visiting the museum, plans are underway to establish a satellite location at the nearby Lewis McChord military base by next summer. Saul adds the museum has been a great help for his children.
We're really thankful for the community that they're creating for the kids, especially for the kids growing up, and us being from the Philippines, not having the community like this for the kids to grow up and develop their skills, art skills, motor skills, and socialize with other kids.
The Tacoma Museum is unique. It's the only one in the U.S. that has no admission charge. Manager Stafford says they don't want finances to stand in the way of child development. Patrons are asked to donate what they can, and for those who wish, memberships can be purchased. The museum in Tacoma serves about 200 kids a day. You're never too old to be young. In Tacoma, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News, I'm one with 25.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks, Thomas. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles and we're one with 25.